The house within, how your space reflects your soul. Have you ever walked into your home and felt something off? Not quite sadness, not quite stress, just a kind of weight in the air. Maybe it's the pile of unopened mail, or the quiet corner where light never quite reaches. Often, it's not the space that's heavy, it's us. In depth psychology, Carl Jung spoke of the unconscious as a house with many rooms. Some we visit often, others we keep locked without knowing why. The walls around us are not just drywall and paint, they are extensions of the psyche, silent reflections of what we hold inside. Your home remembers. It absorbs your moods, your transitions, your stories. A cluttered kitchen can echo indecision. A neglected bedroom might whisper of emotional fatigue. And the front door, how often do we pass through it without realizing it's a threshold between inner and outer worlds? Sometimes a simple act like opening a window becomes an offering, a quiet way of saying, I'm ready to let the wind in and the weight out. Blessing your space isn't about superstition or spectacle. It's about presence. Lighting a candle in the corner where you journal can invite clarity. Smudging sage through the hallway can help shift stagnant energy. Rearranging furniture might feel like reclaiming a part of yourself you forgot you needed. Every gesture, when done with intention, becomes a ritual, a bridge between what you feel and what you choose to live. So if your space has felt heavy or your heart has felt scattered, perhaps it's time to ask, what in this house still reflects who I am? And what is simply waiting to be cleared? Let's begin by listening first to the house, and then to the deeper rooms within us it quietly mirrors. 1. The mirror in the walls. There's something quiet that happens when you pause at the threshold of your own home. A subtle awareness. The air carries your habits. The walls echo back the energy you've been living in. Maybe you've felt it walking into a room and sensing not just what's there, but what lingers. The laundry half folded, the unopened box, the plant that once thrived. Each detail, like a note in the background music of your life, plays out the inner melodies you might not yet have named. Carl Jung often spoke of the house as a symbol of the psychiac room, holding a layer of consciousness. The front door is where we meet the world, the living room, where we perform, the bedroom, where our truest selves often come undone. When these spaces are neglected, it's rarely just about time or energy, it's something deeper. Sometimes we're not ready to look at what that mess represents. Sometimes the clutter is grief that hasn't found its words or decisions we haven't made. Clearing a space is not a chore. It's a kind of conversation. As you pick up that stack of papers, notice what memories come up. As you wipe down the counter, feel the motion as a gesture of care, not just for the surface, but for yourself. If you've ever felt emotionally foggy, try organizing a drawer. It's not magic, but something in the act touching what's been ignored starts to shift the energy. Clarity outside gently invites clarity inside. The unconscious speaks in symbols, and your home is full of them. That corner you avoid, maybe it mirrors a part of yourself you've been reluctant to face. The broken chair you haven't thrown out, perhaps a reflection of a role you've outgrown but haven't released. As you move through your space with awareness, you begin to move through your own inner architecture. Not rushing to fix, but simply noticing, offering presence where there's been absence. There's synchronicity in this Jung's idea that inner shifts often align with outer change. You may find, as you light a candle and sit quietly in your favorite corner, that something softens. The light doesn't just fill the room, it reaches into your chest. The stillness doesn't just calm your body, it allows your unconscious to speak in images, in breath, in silence. That's why creating even a small sacred spot, a chair by the window, a shelf with a stone or a photograph can become an anchor, a place you return to, not just physically, but emotionally. Your home holds your seasons, joy, heartbreak, hope. It holds who you've been and quietly asks who you're becoming. When you bless it through presence, through action, through intention, it doesn't just change the atmosphere, it changes you. The walls begin to soften, and so does the part of you that had forgotten it was safe to open. If our outer space mirrors our emotional state, then the structure of the home itself reveals even deeper layers of our unconscious. 2. Rooms of the soul. Sometimes, a room speaks before we do. You walk in and sense something from the furniture or the lighting, but from the way the air feels. Maybe it's a room that hasn't been touched in weeks. Maybe it's perfectly ranged, but cold. Or maybe it's the space you return to again and again, without knowing why. Carl Jung understood the house not only as a shelter, but as a deep symbol of the psyche. In dreams, it often mirrors our inner architecture. The attic might represent memories we've placed high and out of reach. The basement might hold shadows we've tucked away. The rooms we linger in or avoid reflect more than comfort or habit. They reflect consciousness. In this light, the house becomes a living journal. Each room a chapter, each object a sentence. Some stories are unfinished. Some no longer belong to the person we are becoming. Jung wrote that symbols carry the energy of the unconscious. In our homes, those symbols surround us. The photographs we haven't moved in years. The items we no longer use but haven't released. They quietly influence how we feel and what we believe we are allowed to feel. You might notice it one morning in the bedroom. The curtains remain closed, though sunlight waits just beyond. You sit at the edge of the bed, not quite rested, not quite ready. In that moment, you're not just feeling tired, you are touching something deeper, a resistance, perhaps, or an emotional weight housed in that very space. Try opening the window, letting the air move. Let it stir the energy. Let it carry something out. Or maybe it's the attic forgotten boxes stacked high. The weight of old identities you haven't unpacked or released. Consider lighting a candle before stepping in, not to chase away darkness, but to walk into it gently. Each item you touch becomes a conversation with your past self. Do I still need this part of me? The process is not fast. Healing rarely is, but it's honest, and it's yours. Even the act of creating a sacred spacious small table by a window, a floor cushion with a plant, and a journal becomes a statement. A pause, a new room within. Jung called this kind of integration individuation, bringing the unconscious into awareness, making peace with it, letting it speak. Your home can be a powerful ally in this process if you let it. Not by being perfect, but by becoming awake. So when a room feels stale, heavy, or oddly silent, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it. Let it show you what it's holding. You don't need to understand everything right away. The psyche, like a house, unfolds room by room. And when you walk through it with intention, with breath, with presence, you don't just change the space. You change the way it reflects you. Once we begin to see our rooms as reflections of the soul, even the smallest act of cleaning takes on sacred meaning. 3. Clearing space, clearing self. There's a quiet honesty in the way a cluttered room can reflect a cluttered mind. You may not notice it at first. It starts small. A pile of papers on the kitchen table, a drawer too full to close, a corner you keep saying you'll get to later. But over time, the accumulation becomes something heavier, something that hums beneath the surface of your daily life. And perhaps you've felt it not as mess, exactly, but as a kind of stuckness, a subtle sense that energy isn't flowing, inside or out. Carl Jung often explored the relationship between the outer world and the inner self, suggesting that our environments are not separate from our psyche, but symbolic extensions of it. When we hold on to too much, whether it's old clothes, unread books, or outdated versions of ourselves interrupt that flow, we create congestion in both space and spirit. It becomes harder to hear ourselves, harder to breathe in our own homes. Clearing space, then, is not just about tidiness, it's about recognition. When you take time to sort through a closet, you're not just deciding what to keep or toss, you are acknowledging where you've been and asking, does this still belong to who I'm becoming? The act of choosing becomes an act of witnessing. You might find that certain items stir emotions you didn't expect. An old photo that once comforted now brings ache. A gift that no longer fits your life. These moments are invitations not to judge, but to release. Even the physical gestures matter. The way your hand moves across a dusty shelf, the sound of a drawer being emptied. These small rituals create movement in places that have been energetically still. You begin to feel space open up, not only on the floor but in your chest, your breath, your thoughts. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole. Sometimes wholeness starts with the simple act of making room. Lighting a candle after a deep clean can shift the atmosphere from task to intention. The flame becomes a symbol, a small, flickering reminder that something new can begin here. Or perhaps you place a bowl of salt in the center of the room, letting it draw out what's been lingering unseen. These aren't just aesthetic choices, they're subtle collaborations with the unconscious. They tell your deeper self, I'm paying attention now. You may even feel called to write as you work, to sit afterward and journal what came up. Clearing space often stirs memory, emotion, even dreams. Don't rush to make sense of it. Let it settle. Healing unfolds in layers, like peeling back the wallpaper of an old room to reveal what's been hidden underneath. In these acts, slow, mindful, rooted in care, you are not simply organizing a home. You are realigning your inner architecture. You are unblocking the current, letting the wind back in. And in doing so, you give your soul the spaciousness it's been quietly asking for. And when the space has been cleared and softened, what follows naturally is the invitation to bless it with presence, with intention, with love. 4. Sacred space, inner center. There's a moment quiet, barely noticeable when you walk past a certain corner of your home and feel drawn to pause. Maybe it's where the morning light lands just right, or where you've set a favorite photo beside a candle. It isn't grand or elaborate, but it feels different, safe, calmer somehow. That is your sacred space, a place not built by design trends, but by attention, by emotion, by need. Carl Jung spoke of symbols that bridge the conscious and unconscious. In this light, your sacred space becomes one such symbol, a physical center that holds your inner stillness. When the rest of the world feels loud, you don't need a whole room for this. Often, a single shelf or a patch of floor by a window is enough. The power is not in the size, but in the intention. Maybe you place a small cushion there, maybe a plant that reminds you of growth, or a stone that fits your palm. These are not decorations, they are invitations, anchors, reminders that even in chaos, you can return to yourself. Lighting a candle here doesn't just brighten the space, it shifts the energy. It calls in warmth. It marks a threshold between motion and pause. Over time, this ritual becomes less about the flame and more about what it represents. Your willingness to sit with yourself, to slow the current, to listen. In Jungian terms, this is where the ego meets the self, where the conscious mind makes space for the unconscious to speak. You may find that this space becomes a container for other healing practices. Journaling after a long day, not to solve anything, but to lay it down. Meditating not to silence the mind, but to witness it. Even silence here holds weight. It is not absence, but presence in its purest form. The room begins to remember your rhythm. The walls hold your breath. The energy shifts not just in the space, but in you. Sometimes, creating sacred space also means protecting it. Maybe it's not just the corner itself, but what you allow into it. Setting boundaries not out of rigidity, but out of reverence. No clutter here, no phone, no obligation to be anything other than what you are. In this way, your space becomes sacred not by what you place in it, but by what you remove. The sacred space, like the psyche, thrives on care. Tending to it becomes a mirror of how you tend to your own needs. Just as a neglected altar gathers dust, so too can our inner life if we stop noticing. Returning to this place again and again becomes a kind of promise. I will not abandon myself. And as you sit there, maybe with soft music or nothing at all, you might feel something unspoken begin to rise. Not an answer, perhaps, but a shift. The breath deepens. The thoughts slow. The body remembers it belongs here. The house, for a moment, becomes sanctuary. And so do you. Because a home infused with conscious energy doesn't just look different, it feels different. And it begins to transform everything it touches. 5. When the home heals, so do you. There are days when everything outside feels too much noise, the schedules, the endless stream of expectation. And then you walk into your home, hoping for refuge, only to find that the same heaviness followed you in. It clings to the corners. It lingers in the air. Carl Jung reminded us that our external world is never truly separate from the inner one. What surrounds us is a mirror of what we hold inside. And so, the energy of your home is not passive background. It is an active participant in your inner life. When you begin to bless your space not through doctrine, but through deep attention, you send a message to the psyche. I am ready for change. This is not about perfection. It's about presence. You begin with something small. Maybe you sweep the floor not out of obligation, but as a clearing. As you move the broom, imagine sweeping away the stagnant thoughts, the emotional dust that settled while you weren't looking. Jung believed transformation often starts symbolically, not logically. This gesture then becomes a sacred metaphor. You are not just cleaning, you are clearing space within. You might feel called to speak to the space as you move through it. Words of peace, words of release. They don't have to be eloquently sincere. Let this home be safe. Let this space carry light. Even unspoken, your intention ripples outward. When you light incense, the smoke curls into corners you never notice. It touches what is hidden. It wakes the quiet places. And your body, without needing to explain why, begins to exhale. These rituals, blessing with smoke, setting fresh flowers on the table, placing your hand on a wall just to feel its stillness, airy, not performative. They are bridges. Jung spoke of synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that occur when our inner world aligns with the outer. When you transform your home with care, you often notice life begins to respond in kind. A conversation softens, a relationship shifts. You feel more centered, not because life has changed, but because you have. A blessed home holds you differently. It doesn't just shelter your body, it reflects and supports your growth. Think of the front door. When you cross its threshold, what energy do you step into? What would it feel like to be greeted not by mess or mindless motion, but by calm? Perhaps you keep a small bowl there, a place to drop your keys. Yes, but also to release the day. A subtle signal to your nervous system. You've arrived. You're safe. These are not big gestures, but they are powerful. In blessing your space, you are writing a quiet prayer with your actions. You are saying, "This is who I am now. This is the life I choose to grow." And in that choice, room by room, the house begins to breathe differently. So do you. And perhaps, in transforming the space around you, you'll begin to recognize the quiet, powerful ways your life is already shifting within. Coming home to yourself. Maybe the deepest truth is this: your home is not separate from you. It breathes with you, holds your silence, your chaos, your longing to begin again. Carl Jung spoke of the soul as a house with many rooms, many layers of knowing. And as you move through the physical space you inhabit, you are also walking the corridors of your own psyche. What you choose to see, to touch, to shift, these are not just design choices. They are acts of self-recognition. You don't have to renovate your life overnight. It may begin with the small clearing of a corner that's been neglected, or the soft glow of a candle lit not for decoration, but for presence. These gestures tell your unconscious, "I see you. I'm listening now." And often, that's where healing begins, not in grand solutions, but in attention, in choosing to care for the places that care for you. The message is simple, but never shallow. When you bless your space, you bless your life. When you make room in your home, you make room in yourself for clarity, for peace, for what wants to emerge next. This isn't about perfection. It's about energy, flow, resonance, about letting the space you live in become a conscious ally in your unfolding. And so, as you tend to your home through breath, through ritual, through slow and loving touch, you are also tending to the deeper home within. Room by room, light finds its way back in. And slowly, gently, you come home, not just to a place, but to yourself.